I have to ask you this particular question to start here because this movie is now an Oscar nominee, and I know that's not why you do. Yeah, clap for that.
Yeah. Oh, stop.
I know that's not why you do the work, but it's a very, very big deal when that happens. So for each of you, what does it mean right now to see this kind of movie honored by the Academy?
Oh, we love this. This is it's hugely humbling, especially in a year that has had so much amazing visual effects work across the board. So, I mean, to be nominated or to be recognized by our peers in the industry is huge. We love it.
So well deserved.
Yeah, I just think it's great for the whole team, to feel that we're recognized for the Academy.
They deserve it. Mm-hmm. Damn it! This is the one, guys. This is the Apes movie that's gonna get it.
Again, so well deserved, and we're gonna get a sense of why it was so well deserved because I have like a mile-long list of things that you do in this movie that are just absolutely mind-blowing to me. Wes, I did want to start with you with a broader question, a big two-part question about, I guess, kind of signing on in your journey with this film. When you first agreed to direct this movie, what single thing about it were you most excited to get to do? And then ultimately, was there anything about making Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes that was more creatively fulfilling than you ever could have imagined at the start?
It's interesting. I mean, I was really nervous about the mocap aspect of it all. I'd never done that before. I had worked with Matt Reeves on my previous movie, which was Mouse Guard, which is going to be it was like this. It was going to be a big motion capture thing. And Matt was a producer on that, so he would talk to me about it a lot, so I felt comfortable about it, but I was a little intimidated, just what the hell that thing was going to be like. The thing that excited me the most was probably the world creation aspect of it all. Like when we figured out that idea of the 300-year time cut, it's like, oh, we can go forward and see how the world's starting to kind of disappear and erode away, and how we kind of on our way towards that 68 version of the Charlton Heston movie where there's like no signs left of humanity. It's like, oh, that would be fun. And I've been playing in that visual space for a long time. I had made this little short film called Ruin a long time ago, like 12, 13 years ago, where I was doing the same kind of thing. And of course, all the Maze Runner movies, they kind of play in that same kind of space. This is not by design. It just happens to be, I find myself in these places of working on post-apocalyptic civilization, but it was fun to be able to do it, like make it a real character in the movie, you know what I mean? And then on top of that, it's just to, come up with new characters and try to pull off this crazy magic trick of like, give audiences, they have expectations of what they want to see, but you also have to surprise them. And then at the same time, like try to figure out how not to derail the entire franchise that's been going on for 50 years, and try to finish up a trilogy that was so well received and so highly regarded, but close that door gently and then open up a new door to hopefully start a new trajectory of movies. That was an intimidating process, but some of the funnest stuff was honestly watching the magic trick unfold, for a year in post. It was really fun.
So really like true movie magic in the best possible sense. Before I dig into those details, I do want to jump into make Wes blush time, because we're going to sing your praises, but truly as a leader on this film, you deserve it. It really is something else. I know two of you have worked on all three of the movies. One of you have worked on Dawn, I believe. Is there something about Wes that kind of made him, I guess, like the perfect new addition as a director, someone who fit right into this franchise? But then can you also maybe tell me something about him that is like uniquely him and added a new layer that none of these past films had?
No big deal. No, the thing that's awesome, and I've said it before about Wes, is that he comes from our world. And obviously having that experience meant that...
I was a wannabe visual effects artist.
Yeah, you're all right. Which basically meant like every conversation became a lot easier. We didn't have to get into what I mean when I say whatever, like the specifics of the technical aspect of why we approach the things that we're going to be doing becomes a lot easier to deal with. And that means that we've got that much more time to spend talking about the creative aspects of it and not having to get in the weeds of me wasting time explaining things. So that was kind of a key part of, I think, the success of how we were able to get through as much as we did, as quickly as we did, both in post, but then also on the shoot as well. I think there was just a huge amount of trust. And the thing that was, we had the benefit, obviously, with this of having those three previous movies that we had worked through a lot of teething, growing pains, let's say, or teething issues of the technology between Rise and Dawn, and being able to actually point to specific examples of, we did this on the second movie and it worked really well, or we tried this on the first movie and we would never do that way again, all that kind of stuff. And they actually have those examples that we could all look at together, not just Wes and I, but all of the HODs during the shoot. And it just put everybody in the same kind of frame of mind about how we were going to achieve what we were setting out to achieve. But then the aspects, I guess, generally about Wes that has been hilarious and amazing was the pitch meetings, like through prep before we were even shooting this thing, of just, all right, Wes is going to walk us through what this scene is going to be. And you get this fully narrated, full sound effects kind of extravaganza, standing up, acting everything out. Like by the time you've seen what this film is going to be, and it just gets everyone so jazzed. And I think that kind of energy carries through the production, which you need when it's like 40 degrees Celsius and sweltering heat, and everybody's pulling leeches off each other. And it's in Australia. They never tell you about the leeches. Anyway, it was a huge amount of fun.
Want to add anything about Wes?
Just the Wes makes the process fun. He's got a lot of energy when he's trying to describe what he's wanting, for the shots and what he's wanting out of the characters. So the way he describes things just makes it a lot easier for us to sort of understand, and the process is fun. So it gets a lot of people sort of on board and wanting to actually do the work that he's after. Yeah, great experience.
Thanks, guys.
I did want to follow up on something that I heard you did, Erik, and I don't know if other people contributed to this, that you made a video at the beginning to show to all of the department heads who were maybe newer to this process. Can you maybe run us through some key points that were high priority to convey in that video?
I think the video is kind of what I was touching on earlier, is having the actual material from all three, because the thing that's great is the system we have at Wētā, I can still pull up clips from Lord of the Rings. It's all still there. And so it makes it so easy to dig back into previous shows or to try and remember how we did something. But having that at our disposal meant that I could put together a whole playlist of material, of shots chronologically, even just from like all three of the previous movies, and cut it together and essentially just do a voiceover of walking through, scenario by scenario even, why we approached it the way that we did, and like I was saying earlier, like that, you put it up on Vimeo.
Like film school.
Yeah, exactly. Put it up on Vimeo for everybody on the cast, and everybody in the crew could actually kind of get their head around what we were about to set out, and embark upon before any frame. Before we started rolling.
That's the key, I think, with these movies, is that it doesn't matter how brilliant the visual effects team is on this. If we don't set them up for success, you get shitty VFX. You know what I mean? So we have to shoot it right. We have to approach it right. We have to take the right approach to it and get everyone in the actors on board and the set design on board, and all these different disciplines have to all come together and set the foundation so that they can do their absolute best work. And I think they do. But it's a big giant team effort.
I know why a video like that is especially important for a film like this, but as you were describing that, it's just making me think, I feel like any growing franchise would benefit from having that as they add to their filmmaking family. Let's get into some specifics now. So again, I referenced the fact that the three of you in varying capacities have worked on the past films. You already mentioned that you learn each step of the way. Can you maybe give us a specific example of something that has evolved from film to film to the point that, you've kind of perfected it here, but also give us an example of first that you experienced making Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes?
Technology-wise, a lot of the approach that we have here was very sort of at face value, at least, similar to what we were doing. Over the years, the hardware has gotten a lot more sort of polished and professional, maybe, a lot more ergonomic. As an example, I guess this time around, I think this is our third generation of performance capture suits. Is that right? Like the active capture suit. So like our primary cast was wearing the latest and greatest of the tech, which essentially put all of the, to back up a sec. So I guess with the stuff we're doing in these movies, typically mocap stage, you'd have actors wearing reflective little markers on their suits, and the lights or the actual cameras on the stage shoot out infrared light that bounces back off the markers to the cameras. That doesn't work in the sunrise, in the sunshine, right, when you take it outside. And so what we had to do, and we started doing this back on Rise of the Planet of the Apes, was actually have the actors' suits emit LED or infrared light from LEDs on their suits. The problem is that those LEDs all have to be connected by wires. And as soon as you start having wires on the outside of everybody's costumes, we learned this on the first film, like they were ripping the wires out.
Running through the forest.
Yeah, well, they're trying to do any of this kind of stunt-heavy stuff. So over the years, that became more and more robust. And this time now, it's all kind of really streamlined. All that stuff is embedded within the suit itself, so there's nothing to snag, nothing to catch. So that's one aspect of it. The other thing is the actual capture technology itself. And so this is the first of the Apes franchise films where we've actually had stereo cameras on the head-mounted rig. And that's essentially given our facial team a three-dimensional mesh at 48 frames a second of the actor's face. And so we can really see with extreme detail every little nuance of every expression, especially lips and jaws and things like that become really difficult to ascertain with any precision, what the actual expression was on the actor. And so by doing that, we've just got such a greater view of what's going on. And then Wes talked about it earlier, I'm thinking of something else. I'm about to talk about it. So we also...
I'm sure I talked about it at some point.
I've been talking about this for a long time. To couple with that, this time around, we're also, for the first time on this franchise, using a pair of little machine vision cameras on the matte box of the main motion picture rig, which gives us, again, a three-dimensional view, if we want it, of everything that's kind of within a certain radius of the camera. So all of this technology is kind of going into sort of just giving us the best data that we can get coming back from the shoot, because that's huge, because we can't go back and get it again.
That's what's wild, is that they're wearing computers. You know what I mean? They got all these computer systems. They got this like battery computer system on their back. Their batteries that they're constantly getting replaced. And not only that, but we have like a giant computer truck in the background of the shot that's also capturing all this data and feeding it in. And so it's unlike a typical movie that you could imagine. It's wild.
So all that said, right? I don't want to let the technology overshadow the rest of this, because that's just the data coming in, and then the real magic happens when we actually pull that in and apply it to the characters. And so, Paul, you should talk about some of this, the facial solver stuff.
Yeah, just sort of going further on that, like with the dual face cameras, we got the depth meshes, that gives us the faces that we can go and reference, and that was like a big help for us when we used our new deep learning facial solver. Basically, we could set up the solver, having all this information for each character to basically get a good base for all of our solves that the data went through. And from that, we were able to output some really great performances. But this served as like a really base performance for all of our animators to actually go through and actually detail the emotional performance on these base
Paul deserves some credit too, by the way, because sometimes we can't motion capture this stuff because humans can't do it. So Paul and his team has to go and animate this stuff by hand, and make you and not pull you out. And hopefully you're watching this movie and it's like you forget that you're watching visual effects and you just kind of assume that we actually cast apes and they're actually emoting and all this kind of stuff. And the thing about this magic trick is that, if there's one weak shot, if one little shot kind of falls down, it breaks the spell and you have to spend our time building it back up again. So I think a lot of credit goes to Paul and his team to when we have to do it by hand, we're still meeting that threshold, of reality and something that is again, that magic trick, that miracle of holy crap, most of the characters in this movie are full CG by a bunch of artists and including, the actors that drive them. And hopefully you believe that they're real. You know what I mean?
It's the thing that facial solver, the thing that is really huge about that on this film is that there's so much dialogue going on here, and it was clear from the script. There's more talking apes in this movie than we've had in the previous trilogy together, and so the approach of needing to bring in that solver was because we needed to make sure that the facial animation team, and we split it up at Wētā, so there's actually a separation between the body and the facial animation, because the facial animation is such a specific discipline. We've got some of the best animators in the world on this kind of stuff that just absolutely innately understand the anatomy of the face and the muscle structure underneath all that drives that face. And so the solver takes care of a base pass from what the actors were doing, and it sort of learns the correlation between the dots moving on the actor's face to what the shapes of the ape faces need to be to give you, as an audience, the same kind of emotional hit from what you just saw that we were seeing on the day when the actors were there in front of camera. And that's just a base pass. And that's the thing is like all of your team is spending their time on doing exactly that, of looking at the ape and going, am I reading the same level of anxiety or apprehension or exuberance or whatever it may be in this exact moment, and making sure that that's what we're spending our time talking about, and not the nuts and bolts of just, the jaw should be a little more open.
That's right, yeah. And a lot of that comes through the eyes, like all that emotion, the majority of the emotion you read through the eyes. So like just having the eyelid a little bit higher or lower, can really change an expression, or even just the head angle to camera can really change that expression. So a lot of that detail that we're looking at just with the facial reference cameras might look fine, just with the when we're comparing it against the cameras pointing straight at the face. But when we have that perfect, but when we put it in front of the shot camera, it can actually look different again. So we need to go and adjust that head angle or that eye line to make it look as it did in shot camera as well. So
it's hard to impress upon you guys like how subtle this work really is. It's like we would go through shots and I'm like, there's just something that's not what is it? There's something that's not working. And I swear sometimes it's like the eyelid just needs to go up 1 millimeter. And click, there it is. Suddenly now it feels real. It's like, it's amazing to watch like how well they know this stuff, their stuff. You know what I mean? So really cool stuff.
I have a million follow-up questions. The first thing that I really want to know about is, and Wes, I'll start by throwing this to you, but if any of you have any insight, do chime in as well. I'm so curious, what are some of the first pointers you give actors doing this kind of performance capture work for the very first time? So you could, I'm sure there's some sort of like evolving to it, but so that you could hit the ground running as soon as possible.
Well, part of that, I'm sure you guys all kind of heard of it before, but Ape School. We put them through Ape School for 6-7 weeks with a real motion trainer, and all the actors, they just became buddy. I mean, I've done this before where it's almost like a camp where you put all the actors together and they have their own little space, this little basement dungeon on stage on the lot that we were shooting at, and they would just walk around for a while, not talking at all, and just put on their little stilt arms, and they'd walk around and they just and just act like apes the entire day. You know what I mean? And we'd do this for weeks and weeks, and then I never saw this at first, and there's a story where they invited me to come down one day, and I come down this crazy dark, tunnel down in this little weird pit, this dungeon, and all of a sudden I'm accosted by all these human beings, aping me. You know what I mean? It was creepy. It was very weird, but it was so crucial for them because it feels freaking weird. And when you're out on set, and you got 100 people, all crew members looking at you with a boom up there and a guy with his butt hanging out doing this, whatever, and like they got to go around and act totally silly when you look at it from the outside. But the Andy Serkis came on and kind of told us how important it is you can't pretend to be an ape. You have to be an ape. Right? So it has to become such an internal process that you're not even thinking about it. It becomes second nature. So that was a huge necessary part for all the actors to kind of go through this kind of process of just internalizing, and they would all come up with their own kind of body language, right? So I told the story before, but a lot of times when Eric's talking about this mocap stuff, this data that comes through, I'll just see the skeleton, right? I'll see just the skeleton, the plot points essentially of all these little markers around their suits. So you can't see the actor. You just see their little weird stick figure of the people moving through the shots. And I can pick out which actor is which based on that skeleton, based on how they hold themselves, right? So Anaya is a good example. Anaya character here. You see him in the movie, he's always holding his arm like this. I think it's his left arm. He's always doing this. Right? And so what that was is he came up with a background story that wasn't in the movie at all, that when he was a boy, when he was a little tiny ape, he had a little toy that he always carried in his arm, right? And so that's why he always walked around. So now as he grew up, he still has this weird little thing. And so it just becomes like this little signature, this little character signature. And all the actors came up with these little things for themselves, that and they really, really embraced it. I think a lot of credit goes to these guys. They've never done this before, especially Owen, who had to kind of shoulder this thing. Who would want to follow Andy Serkis, right? And so he had to kind of come into this thing and never waned. He was brave and courageous and just committed to this thing. They all did. And couldn't be more proud of him,
I mean, I just want to be greedy. Do you have another example? Because I love character backstory that we don't see on screen, but we can feel informing a performance like that. Do you have another example?
It's not on top of my mind. I'm sure I will keep talking. Keep going. Well, I'm sure
I could hear about that kind of stuff all day long.
There's tons of that. Even the actors, you should bring them in. But even Eric in these little videos he did, he would interview all the actors, and they would just talk about their characters. And he would film it for all the artists to go on, and so they would have this background of what the actor was thinking during this scene or during that shot, or what was kind of inspired their characters, right? So this kind of like this intuitive thing of how do you make something that's synthetic, believable and real and magical. There's no button that makes this happen. It is sheer effort by a lot of people. You know what I mean? That's why they deserve the Oscar.
Tell us how you really feel.
I'll broaden this question
biased.
for the three of you, whether it was something from those video interviews or maybe even a surprising creative choice an actor made on set while doing the work. Can you maybe give me an example of a time when one of their choices, I guess, inspired you in a new way or changed what you thought a scene was going to turn out to be?
You're talking about their performance. Their performance was essential, but what I think about is on set, they couldn't see themselves. They couldn't see the end result of what they were going to be. We were building it as they were filming them. So to imagine themselves and their end product and have that visual is amazing. And then in reverse, when we got the intro videos, our artists would take them and it would inspire them to add nuances of their performance into the build of the characters. So while they're shooting for 6 months or whatever, we're working in tandem. So by the end of the shoot, they can see a semblance. They might have seen a couple of concepts, but they haven't seen themselves moving. So you've got to understand that by the time they finished filming was probably the first time that they saw themselves as their true character. And there was a moment when Noah sees his dad and has passed away, and that was one of our first shots that we visualized because it was very emotive and we wanted to get his emotion on screen. And
when he says that, I will find them, I will bring them home.
And I remember
Look at that shot for months.
Yeah. And I remember sitting in dailies and everyone just stopped because we were like, that's him. That's the character. He's real. You didn't question it. And so it was like, make everything look like that. How long does that take?
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, such a beautiful example. Yeah. Any others?
Korro, Noah's father. I was so freaking worried about that character because, you know, when you're looking at it through the camera and they got these silly dots on their face and they're just, you know, saying the lines and looking funny and you're like, oh my God, is this gonna work? I mean, it is a leap of faith, but fortunately we had all these movies before us, so we're like, I'm gonna trust it. And Erik kept saying, don't worry, it's gonna be fine. And as soon as we got that ape in there with all his cool freaking feathers and all his costume thing, and he had this gravelly voice. He smokes like a pack of cigarettes an hour, I think. It like boom, it just worked. That was like a huge surprise for me. That was like, this is gonna work. Okay, good.
Yeah. I mean, just for Noah as an example. I mean, I think the thing that's awesome is Owen. We keep mixing these things up the entire shoot, so it was just start calling him Noah. He has these expressions these kind of typical expressions that we would see him do all the time. You may have noticed, like every time he'd kind of get apprehensive, he'd like sort of purse his lips together, and he's got these very specific eyes. And one exercise we sort of did early on in the design process of these characters was to take the photograph or image of the actor and you sort of flip-flop it and look at it and see how asymmetrical somebody's face is. And,
shocking.
And Owen's face is insanely asymmetrical. His left eye has got to be like eighth of an inch lower than his right or something like that.
You don't notice when you're looking at him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we'd been working on working on the design of Noah for weeks and weeks and weeks, and it was just like, it's getting there. We'd pass images. Wes would take it in Photoshop and liquefy and push things around and try different proportions and stuff. And we finally had noticed this eye thing and applied that to Noah and shifting his eye down. You went,
click.
Whoa.
Yeah.
There he is. And the way that then all of everything that Owen's doing in his performance throughout the shoot just translates straight through to that character. And I remember talking to Owen's parents after the premiere, and they're like, we saw him so many times.
He's in there.
Yeah, they saw their son on screen in an ape form. It was, which was really cool.
It's very, very impressive. We've been highlighting, the centerpiece of your movie, the apes. But one thing I tend to get a little obsessed with VFX is invisible VFX. And like you also have a wealth of challenges in that particular department. So can you maybe each take a moment to highlight some sort of vital VFX work that isn't front and center
There's
and highly
33
talked
minutes
about?
of 100% full CG in the movie,
That.
right? Like there are shots in the movie where you go from 2 horses that are real to the next shot is there's CG horses and then back to real horses. That kind of magic trick is really hard to do. There's fire in the movie. Most of the fire in the movie is all CG. That alone is like a don't go there, guys. That's dangerous. That's dangerous. The water, for crying out loud, all the water. So we had a small little river for the river sequence, right? We had a small little tank that we built. So all the shots with May, is we have some water, but most of it got replaced anyway. But all the rest of it is all CG. All that stuff with the flood at the end there, when like the things come, the water's coming in and the apes are kind of drowning, all this kind of stuff. It's all CG, not just the water, not just the apes, the bolts, the lights, the railing, the whole world. It's all CG. And that to me is like, I've been wanting to do basically a full CG mocap movie for a long time. So I got a little taste of it here, you know what I mean? So to me, that was like, I love the fact that we kind of could mix live action and full CG kind of pretty all over the movie. And I don't think most people, even educated people about this process can tell. I think it's a testament to your work. Right?
You see what I'm talking about? It's great.
I will say your enthusiasm for their work and supporting them right now is infectious.
We had a year of this.
These movies are fun. Yeah. These movies are fun because they are, we are trying to, capture that magic and tell a story and entertain people, but they're also really, really complicated technical problems constantly that you're dealing with. And there's so much enjoyment in that. And the fact that we get to wield these incredible tools that they are kind of masters of, I don't know, it's just, it's inspiring.
So you asked about some of the invisible stuff that people wouldn't have noticed. All right, so there's a scene when we first meet the Marauders on horseback with the torches, and that scene at nighttime after Noah goes out. So that was a location that we had found south of, like an hour south of Sydney, an abandoned petroleum Coke plant. Yeah. Not Coca-Cola, but Coke, the petroleum product. That would have been a different story. But we had this like really fantastic derelict looking place that then, was just naturally overgrown because it hadn't been used for years. And then Greens came in and put even more stuff down. Night shoot, big lighting rigs, balloons, everything else.
In 1 8-hour shoot, we had to shoot that scene.
Yeah.
It's impossible.
Yeah. So we went out there, gave it our best, shot things, our DP Jula had lit the place. It looked awesome. And then we kind of got it into the editing room. Wes and Dan got it in the editing room and was like,
I can do better.
Yeah. And so by the time we got around to additional photography, a few months from the end of our production period, it was like, all right, we're gonna go back and do this right. And so we essentially recaptured the scene, all the performance work, everything else. No horses this time. It was
missing one part of that story. We had planned this reshoot, right?
COVID.
Yeah. And not just the COVID, the freaking actor strike happened.
That's right, yeah.
So we couldn't bring our actors in, but we had to get going on this thing. So we couldn't kind of plan the shoot. We couldn't do this, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, Erik, can we just go full CG? And that's what we did. And it worked great.
Yeah, yeah. So, but the thing that was awesome is by that point, of course, we already had all of this photography from the original go-around. And so we had the most perfect reference you could ask for because we had scanned the shit out of that place. Like we had data about the location, everything we needed in terms of what it looked like in the daytime, so we could just make all the materials and everything else match. So yeah, and that scene came through really quickly as well.
Amazing, right? It was amazing. And we didn't shoot that scene really. We went on stage after Christmas. It was really late in the game. I'm assuming this is on. Can you hear me, right? I'm like this. So we shot that super late in the game. There's another scene too with Proximus in that dinner table scene when he brings Noah to the window and he talks about humans and their tools. That was a last minute, we didn't have that scene in there for the longest time. We had a version of the scene, but it was like we kept watching the scene. It's like there's something we're missing. It's like it's not quite working. And once we realized that we had to have Proximus state his goals here of and talk about the idea that he's fascinated by humans. He's a fan of man. You know what I mean? He's enamored by these tools that human beings were able to create. And so once we kind of figured out the dialogue of that thing, we had literally we had to fly out because we went to New Zealand to do this, because like why bring New Zealand and the Wētā team all the way to Los Angeles when we could just go to New Zealand? So we literally, this is like, I don't know, 2 months before we were supposed to deliver or something. It was crazy. We had this 1.5 minute long scene we had to go shoot. I flew Kevin, myself, and Owen out there to Wētā, and we just went out there and shot it for a day. I even had some of the people like in remote kind of watching the take because we were so worried about this scene. It's gotta work, because they have no backup plan if this doesn't work. And so turned it over. Paul and the gang basically took it on like a champ, and just it was like down to the wire, like we had no time. But I'll say this, it's the only movie I've ever done where when we finished, we had like a day left over. Like usually you're working to the last freaking minute and they're pulling it out of my hands, you know what I mean? I'm in a grading suite, but we had this ending, it was a testament to Danielle's work here. It was just ran so freaking smoothly. We had less time than previous movies. We had like more apes, more everything, more worlds, more everything, But it went so smoothly, and at the very end of the movie, which is kind of like, it was weird. It was like that story in Titanic where the ship supposedly, when the thing sunk, he just kind of swam off. It wasn't this violent thing. It was just, we just kind of like, just drifted off, and we all went our own ways. The movie's over, and then go off on the release date, thing. And I don't know. It was a good experience.
Yeah, I mean, I think again, testament to Danielle and her entire production crew in the planning of this, because we actually were able to sort of ramp down towards the end instead of having this panic crunch in the last weeks.
We get the shitty shots.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yeah, and
you're just racing to kind of just do something. I don't know, whatever.
And we had the opposite. We actually had time to go back and make some shots better that he already finalized like 3 months ago. Which is. By the way,
that's a cool story too. From my point, my learning experience. So I could talk all night for this thing, guys. I'm sorry, I don't even hog this thing, but just from my experience, it was so interesting because I knew enough to be dangerous about visual effects, right? But I had no clue what it really takes to do these movies. But there was like this one shot when Noah wakes up from it, from a dream that got cut. But when he wakes up, which God damn it, it's the one cut I wish I kept up in. It had this awesome shot of Koro coming out of the fire in Noah's dream. Anyway, but in that scene when he sees the eagle and it comes up and Dad's spirit animal basically, we worked on that shot for the longest time. I remember I finalized that really early on. And then I was like, oh, this looks amazing. Look at this. And the editing bay, me and the editor and all the guys were like, this is amazing. This is incredible. So a couple weeks go on, we keep working on their shots, and this is how we kind of go, one shot at a time, constant through weeks and weeks and weeks. And then finally, 2 months later or something, I get a new version of that shot that I'd finalized, months ago. And it was like an extra level better. I had no clue it could get better. You know what I mean? So that was a learning experience for me. It's like they could see, oh, this isn't there yet. Even though I said that's perfect, they could tell, no, we could do better than this. And so that recalibration for me was like a huge learning experience to see like, oh, what's possible. So you just, I think that's what separates on a lot of things in movies is the people that stop versus the people that keep pushing. And going into that new territory and that new ground that you can break, and that I always remember that moment.
Kind of realizing on the next one we're going to be screwed.
Oh yeah, just wait.
Thank you for saying the next one, because that could tee up my greedy question quite a bit. I asked you this back at the junket when the movie came out, and then I heard some positive rumblings back in the fall. Has there been any more forward momentum with another installment?
Yeah, we're talking about it. That's all I can say, really. But I'm greedy. I've got multiple things that I'm kind of playing with right now. I'd love to do all of them. But there's so many cool places that we could go with the next one. You know what I mean? And we have these ideas of like where we wanted to go with it. Things that are set up in this movie that you don't even realize are setups. But movie 2 is almost always the best one of the trilogy. You know what I mean? That's the way it works. It's like that's where all the drama is where all the conflict is, and that's where like this really dark stuff happens, or really consequential stuff. And like this character of Noah and how much he has changed by the events of this movie. The fact that we've set up all these characters and we've kind of set up this runway for where ultimately we could go and what we have in our minds. I don't know, it's super exciting. And these movies, they're some of the last kind of thinking person's blockbusters, right? They're big giant Hollywood, although we made them from very cheap. $160 million, guys. I mean, that's crazy compared to other movies that cost twice that. Anyway, but the fact that I don't know, we could do some really, really special stuff, I think, and we're looking forward to that. But there are other projects that are also in the wings too.
I'll be extra greedy and follow up on that. Do you know what you're going to jump into next, Zelda or Ruiner?
No, Ruiner is a thing that is actually really cool. I can't even say my pitch. I shouldn't say that.
I was watching some gameplay. It looked really cool, and it looked like it could be probably one of the more violent things you've ever done.
My pitch was, imagine the professional, Leon, in a Blade Runner universe. Super cyberpunk, freaking aggressive, muscular. I want to play in that world. But anyway, that'll take its time. Let's just say the two things are Zelda and Apes. That's what I'm being greedy for right now.
I'll take that answer. All right, I do have to let you go, but I always like to, a lot of people in this audience know, it's one of my favorite questions to end on. And I do think it's especially important here because in this industry, we give each other awards. And I do think that's really cool. And I'm glad we're celebrating your Oscar nomination tonight. But I find that nobody in film and television kind of tells themselves good job as much as they should. So can you each give me an example of something you accomplished making Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes that you'll always be able to look back on and say, you know what, I'm really proud of what I did there. And again, I know it's a team effort, but give yourself a little credit.
Start with me. I don't know. I just think the experience of the shoot told me that the prep part of that movie and what we talked about earlier, just getting everybody calibrated for what we were going to be doing, this was the smoothest shoot I've ever been on. And I think in terms of I've never felt more supported by a crew than this movie. And so right there, that tells me we did something right.
I'm just really proud of, I guess, all the character work and basically being able to bring these characters to life, from basically helping with understanding the design and making sure that the animation was going to work for these characters and to bring their performances through. So I'm really pleased for the team that we were able to achieve that.
I think what I'm most proud of is, the people that you don't see that help make this movie. All around the world, but at Wētā, that they were proud by the end and looking at what they had pulled off. Without it's a long, arduous time to keep people engaged, and they were energized thanks to Wes and all of these guys, and to create a team of people that were supportive and feeding that vision for a very long period of time, like we were in post for over a year. So to keep that energy up is a testament to the production team and the supervisors and everybody having the right synergy, and Wes at the head of that being really generous and inspiring them. So people feed off creative vision, and I was really proud of being part of that.
If I can be greedy, I guess on the post side of things, I think we made an environment for the team where people felt empowered to work together in ways that they maybe haven't done before. And so we saw the fruits of that all over the place constantly, of just a comp soup and an anim lead or something, just having a little side meeting, trying to figure out, what's the best approach. It wasn't people were being told, all right, they asked me to do the thing, I'll do the thing. It was just really a lot of proactivity going on through the film, and you see it on the screen.
Yeah, cool.
You got to answer it too, man.
I don't know, man. I've been talking like you guys' head off, but I'm proud of all of it. I don't know. It was a quiet learning experience. It's my fourth movie, so I've got a lot to learn still. I look at this movie and I still see a lot of things that I need to do better next time. I think most directors would probably say that. When they feel like they made a perfect movie, you probably should stop. Whatever we do next, we'll try to do even better. But thank you guys for coming.
Look, I love how you say that when we're celebrating your Academy Award nominated film.
These guys deserve it, baby.
Again, it is so incredibly well deserved. That was one of the nominations that put the biggest smile on my face because I've been watching and rewatching this movie since it came out last year. Huge congratulations, and thank you for sharing some of your experience with us tonight.
Yeah. Much deserved. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you for sticking around.